Okay, and to our last presenter, who is going to conclude the fifth Israeli Science Communication Conference, Dr. Arnon Hershkovitz from here, from School of Education in Tel-Aviv University, and the presentation that I personally was waiting for 2 days now.
All right. So, especially because I'm the last presenter, I tried to squeeze my presentation to as minimum as possible, and I had to take a very tough decision this morning, whether I give up some of the fascinating results or give up some of the jokes that I prepared. So unfortunately I gave up the jokes. So, social media, as we all know, have changed the way people communicate and people consume knowledge and the ways in which knowledge itself is being transferred and received. We have hundreds of millions of users every day getting pushed knowledge to them, which increases significantly the chance of having learning, serendipitous moments of learning.
Excuse me, can you talk to the microphone?
Yeah. Is that better? Yes. Okay. Even the very distinction between knowledge and information has changed, as Lansher et al. Stated. They were not sure how far knowledge and information are even the right metaphors for characterizing much of what we find online. So if that is true, and we believe it's true, there are new fascinating ways to promote scientific knowledge and ways and opportunities to encourage new kind of learning. And this is of course wonderful. However, this new media requires new forms of communication in terms of audience, language, very conventions knowledge is being transferred by, reciprocity, and those who don't fit into it might feel like a carriage on a Canadian highway. With that, and as in the post-industrialist society, the knowledge itself might be the single most important commodity, the role of the knowledge brokers emerged. Knowledge brokers are simply person or organizations that mediate between the knowledge producers and the knowledge users. However, knowledge brokers often produce knowledge by themselves. And again, this has formed a new type of knowledge. As Mayer put it, brokered knowledge. Is knowledge made more robust, more accountable, more usable? Knowledge that serves locally at a given time. Knowledge that has been and reassembled. So we have, on the one hand, new channels of communicating knowledge, and on the other hand, very new type of knowledge. Which brings us directly to Twitter. Twitter, just to put it on the table, it's the 10th most popular site on the internet as of last week. The second most popular social networking site after Facebook. It's 7.5 years old already and has more than 200 million monthly active users, 100 million daily active users, and 5,700 tweets every second. Twitter's most followed accounts are world leaders. Number 4 on this list doesn't know to sing. Okay, so I left one. And science is also kind of popular on Twitter. NASA, CERN, Scientific American accounts has millions of followers. There are also celebrity scientists on Twitter, just to example, Professor Chokako and Professor Dan Ariely. And studies show that Twitter serves like a news agency. Most of the tweets are about news. But this is a very different kind of a news agency. It discusses different topics than the traditional media. when comparing Twitter top trends to New York Times top trends, we see different ranking in the public interest. And crowds are formed around this news, which is the very essence of the social network, which again brings us to the notion of knowledge brokers. If crowds are formed, there are accounts which serve as news curators or knowledge brokers. So the question is whether Twitter is a new kind of scientific news agency. And this is the question that is in the center of this study. This is a pilot study that was made not a while ago. It's the first step towards a bigger study that I hope will be started pretty soon. And regarding scientific news, the questions are, to what extent do they exist in the Hebrew Twitter sphere? Who are the knowledge brokers, and are there learning opportunities? We should remember that I'm from the School of Education, so I'm interested in learning. We were collecting tweets about the top scientific news of 2012 and early 13. And each tweet was labeled twice. First by the categorizing the tweeter, i.e. the account holder, whether it was a news source, either traditional news source like a real newspaper Twitter account, or an online news source, or a journalist, or whether it was an individual or individuals who are science, technology oriented, or other kinds of individuals, or academic or educational organizations, or governmental organizations, or some other kind. And this was done quite qualitatively. We're following each account, trying to understand by signals and cues who is the Twitterer. And the second labeling was done for identifying learning opportunities. Shortly, to speak, the learning opportunities is a tweet that mentions the scientific terms in their scientific context, not as part of a joke, for example, or opens up doors for further investigation, like putting up link or hashtags to another crowd. These are the top scientific news taken from the summary of the newspapers, Israeli Nobel laureate, Arnon Hershkovitz, and Curiosity Mars Landing, and Felix Baumgartner's jump, etc. So overall we had 241 tweets, which might sound like a low number, that's the number. And the most popular story was of the Higgs boson. You can see the rest of the list. Curiosity the second place, Nobel laureate Arnon Hershkovitz third place, Baumgartner. Israel Prize, all of the Israeli Prize winners together were mentioned 26 times. Alpha Centauri and the star with the 4 suns that was discovered. In Hebrew, yeah, everything. In the Hebrew Twitter sphere, yeah, which might explain. Yeah. We'll get it. Yeah. Now, when we examine who were the tweeters, with the highest number of tweets around these topics, we start to see a very interesting pattern. We see a mix of news source and individuals oriented into science and technology. And when we check the overall distribution of the tweets, this picture is much clearer. We have other individuals and news source accounts share almost the same amount of tweets at the top of the list, and then individuals with science and technology orientation. However, if we examine whether these tweets had learning opportunity or not, the picture is much more interesting because the other individuals tweet about these terms in non-scientific nature. So their tweets are not of high learning opportunity compared to the news source tweeters and the cited individual tweeters. So if we focus only on the tweets that have learning opportunities, 161 overall, we see at the top the news source category and the cited individual category. And you should notice that government and academic education are very representative, unfortunately. So there might indeed be a rise of a new kind of knowledge brokers in this platform or in these platforms. Two important notes. Many studies of the Twitter sphere or other social media platforms run qualitative analysis and try to automatically detect keywords in tweets. And many of the tweets here were not of scientific nature, so the qualitative approach proved to be successful, even necessary. Another point to consider is that leading cited individuals are also active on other platforms, which make this whole knowledge brokering much more complex. This will be part of the broader research. So to conclude, I observe a new type of knowledge brokers that might indeed be rising over the social media. Question arise, what motivates them, how do they learn, how do they use technology, how are they perceived by the audience, by the layman users. On the other hand, all the traditional educational values like universities and government organizations are very represented here. Should be educated to use these platforms, should we not? And there are some ethical dilemmas that I raise in every presentation on this topic, and I won't discuss them here. And this is why I didn't bring any quote and I didn't bring any example of tweets from the research. I'll be very glad to discuss it offline after 12 minutes are finished, and that's it.
Lucy, sorry about that, but we have to be quick because our taxis for Jerusalem are already waiting. So,
why do you think the tweets from the academic institutions are so low? What they are afraid of?
It might be that they tweet mostly in English to the international audience and not necessarily to the Israeli audience. But that's to be checked.
About concerning the ethical issue, do you think that it is necessary to develop some protocols for the academic institutions in order to make tweets?
To make tweets or to research tweets?
To make research.
To make, I'm not sure. To research, I'm quite sure there should be some ethical protocols about how to research and how to publish it.
Thank you very much.